If you've ever stood in your living room in the middle of July, sweating, staring at your thermostat, wondering why your air conditioner is running non-stop and your house still feels like an oven, you are not alone. Most homeowners think the problem is inside the house. They think it's the vents or the filter, or maybe the unit is just getting old and tired. But after decades of walking into homes just like yours, I can tell you the real problem is very often sitting right outside, baking in the sun, working twice as hard as it needs to. And the fix, believe it or not, can cost you less than $20. Today, I'm going to show you something that changed the way I think about home cooling, something I stumbled onto almost by accident. And once you understand why it works, you'll probably never look at your outdoor AC unit the same way again. My name is Mike Anderson. I'm a third-generation American master plumber, and I've spent the last 45 years repairing, inspecting, and maintaining thousands of residential systems in homes all across this country. Now I know what you're thinking, plumbing and air conditioning aren't exactly the same trade, and you're right, they're not. But here's the thing nobody tells you. When you've spent as many years as I have crawling through basements, standing in backyards, and working alongside HVAC guys on the same job sites, you start to pick up more than just pipes and drains. You start noticing patterns in how a house wastes energy, wastes water, and wastes money. Over the years, I've worked side by side with heating and cooling technicians more times than I can count, and I've learned a thing or two about keeping a house comfortable without draining your wallet. During my career, I've seen homeowners spend hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars on brand new units, convinced their system was failing, when the real issue was something so simple it's almost embarrassing. Today, I want to walk you through exactly what I tested in my own home using my own outdoor condenser unit and share with you the results, because I think every homeowner deserves to know this before they call for an expensive replacement. Let's talk about why this problem happens in the first place. Your air conditioner's outdoor unit, the big metal box sitting on a concrete pad or a patch of gravel somewhere outside your house, is called the condenser. Its job is simple in concept, but demanding in practice. It takes the heat that's been pulled out of your house and releases it into the outside air. For that to happen efficiently, the unit needs to pull in air that's as cool as possible, run it across the coils, and push the heat away. Now, here's the problem. In most homes I've visited, that condenser unit is sitting in direct, unfiltered sunlight for 6, 8, sometimes 10 hours a day. In the middle of summer, when the sun is beating down on that metal casing, the air immediately surrounding the unit can be 10, sometimes 15 degrees hotter than the actual outdoor air temperature just a few feet away. Think about that for a second. Your air conditioner is designed to expel heat into the outside air, but if the air right around it is already superheated because the unit itself is acting like a stovetop sitting in the sun, it has to work that much harder just to do its basic job. I'd say in about 7 out of 10 homes I've walked through during the peak of summer, the condenser is sitting in a spot with zero shade, completely exposed from sunrise to sunset. And most homeowners have no idea this is even a factor because nobody ever explained it to them. Now, let's talk about the mistakes I see homeowners make over and over again. The first mistake is assuming that because the unit is metal and built for outdoor use, the sun simply doesn't affect it. I hear this all the time. Folks say it's designed to be outside so the weather shouldn't matter. And technically, yes, the unit is built to withstand outdoor conditions, but withstanding the heat and operating efficiently in the heat are two very different things. The second mistake I see constantly is homeowners planting bushes or building fences directly around the unit, thinking they're doing the right thing by blocking the sun, but they end up restricting airflow instead, which causes a whole different problem. The third mistake, and this one surprises people every single time, is homeowners running their air conditioner at full blast during the hottest part of the afternoon, wondering why their electric bill is through the roof, without ever considering that the unit outside is essentially breathing hot, stagnant air the entire time. The fourth mistake is ignoring the unit altogether. Out of sight, out of mind. Most people clean their gutters, they check their furnace filter, they might even get their ducts cleaned, but that outdoor condenser sits there year after year completely neglected, absorbing sunlight like a black asphalt driveway in July. So let's get into the science of why this actually matters, and I'll keep this simple because I'm not here to lecture you with a physics textbook. Your air conditioning system works by moving heat from inside your home to outside your home. The refrigerant inside the system absorbs heat from the air in your living room, then travels out to that condenser unit where it releases that heat into the outdoor air and cools back down before cycling through your home again. This entire process depends heavily on what's called the temperature differential, which is just a fancy way of saying the difference between the temperature of the refrigerant and the temperature of the surrounding air. The bigger that difference, the easier and faster the heat transfers. But when the air around your condenser is artificially hotter because of direct sunlight beating down on the metal casing, that temperature differential shrinks. And when it shrinks, the system has to run longer, work harder, and consume more electricity just to pull off the same job it could have done much more easily in shaded air. This is the same basic principle behind why a black car parked in direct sun gets so much hotter inside than a car parked in the shade, even though the outside air temperature is identical for both cars. Your condenser unit is essentially doing the same thing, minute after minute, hour after hour, all summer long. Now here's something almost nobody tells you, and it took me years of watching HVAC technicians work before I finally put it together myself. Manufacturers actually publish efficiency ratings for these units based on specific outdoor air temperatures, usually somewhere around 95 degrees Fahrenheit. But those ratings assume normal ambient air, not the artificially superheated air bubble that forms around a condenser sitting in full unshaded sun. When that unit is baking directly in sunlight for hours, the actual operating temperature it experiences can be significantly higher than what the manufacturer used to calculate efficiency, which means your system might be running well below its rated performance without you ever knowing it, simply because of where it happens to be sitting in your yard. So what's the actual solution? After testing this myself, and after talking with HVAC folks I've known for years, I decided to try something simple. I installed a shade cover, sometimes called a condenser shade or an AC sun shield, positioned above my outdoor unit. Now, I want to be very clear about something important here because this matters for safety and performance both. You never want to fully enclose the unit or block the sides where air needs to flow in and out. That would restrict airflow and cause a completely different set of problems, possibly even damaging the compressor. What you want instead is something that blocks direct sunlight from hitting the top and the sun-facing side of the unit while still allowing air to flow freely through the sides and around the coils. Think of it less like a box and more like an umbrella. It shouldn't touch the unit, it shouldn't seal it in, it should simply create a shadow. Let me walk you through exactly what I did, step by step, so you can try this yourself if you're curious. First, what you'll need. A simple shade structure, and there are plenty of inexpensive options out there designed specifically for outdoor condensers, usually running you somewhere in the $15 to $25 range depending on the size of your unit. Some are simple angled panels, others are small pergola-style frames. You'll also want a tape measure, and if you're mounting anything into the ground, a basic post hole digger or a mallet depending on the stakes provided. Before you do anything, take a few minutes to check your unit's manufacturer clearance requirements. Most manufacturers recommend at least 24 to 36 inches of clearance around the sides of the unit and a minimum clearance above the unit as well, usually around 5 to 6 feet, to allow proper airflow and heat dissipation. This information is usually printed right on a sticker inside the unit's access panel, or you can find it in the manual if you still have it. Once you know your clearance requirements, position your shade structure so that it sits above and slightly to the sun-facing side of the unit, without ever touching the casing itself. You want at least a few inches of open space between the shade and the top of the unit so hot air can escape upward freely, rather than getting trapped underneath. If you're using stakes or a simple frame, take your time leveling it and making sure it's stable, especially if you live somewhere that gets strong winds, because the last thing you want is your shade cover blowing over during a storm and landing on the unit itself. Give it a good tug once it's installed. Make sure it's secure and stand back to take a look at the overall clearance. You should be able to see daylight and airflow moving freely on all sides. After installation, give the system a little time to show you results. I'd recommend monitoring your thermostat and your energy usage over about a full week, since day-to-day weather can vary, and you want a fair comparison. In my own case, testing this over several days during a stretch of consistently hot weather, I noticed the air coming out of my vents felt noticeably cooler and my system wasn't cycling on and off nearly as often. Some homeowners I've spoken with who tried similar setups reported their indoor temperature dropping several degrees faster once the AC kicked on, simply because the unit outside wasn't fighting against superheated air anymore. Now, I want to be honest with you, because I promised you accurate advice, not hype. Results will vary depending on your specific unit, your climate, and how much direct sun your unit was getting beforehand. If your condenser was already partially shaded by a tree or the side of your house, you're not going to see as dramatic a difference. But if you're like most of the homeowners I've encountered, sitting out there in full unfiltered sun for the majority of the day, this simple change can make a real difference in how efficiently your system runs. Now, let me share a few professional tips I've picked up over the years that go hand in hand with this kind of upgrade. First, always keep at least 2 feet of clearance on all sides of your unit even after adding a shade cover so that airflow is never restricted. Second, take a few minutes every month during the summer to clear away any grass clippings, leaves, or debris that build up around the base of the unit, because that debris can block airflow just as much as direct sunlight can hurt efficiency. Third, if you have the option, consider the natural orientation of your yard before choosing exactly where to place a shade structure. In many homes, the unit sits on the west or south side of the house, which tends to get the most punishing afternoon sun. If you can angle your shade cover to block that specific afternoon exposure, you'll get the most benefit. Fourth, and this is something I always tell folks, never use materials that trap heat or block airflow completely, like tarps or solid plastic sheeting draped directly over the unit. That defeats the entire purpose and can actually make things worse by trapping hot air right where the unit needs to breathe. Let's talk about a few mistakes to avoid when you're doing this yourself. Don't place the shade cover so close to the unit that it restricts the top airflow, since heat needs somewhere to escape. Don't use permanent fencing or solid walls thinking that more coverage is always better, because airflow restriction is just as harmful as direct sun exposure, sometimes even more so. Don't forget to check your local codes or your HOA guidelines if you live in a community with restrictions on outdoor structures, even small ones like this. And don't assume bigger is better. A shade cover that's appropriately sized for your specific unit will always outperform an oversized structure that ends up trapping heat instead of releasing it. Now, a few safety reminders, because I always want you to protect yourself and your home while doing any kind of outdoor project. If you're using any tools to install stakes or anchors, wear gloves to protect your hands, especially if you're working with metal materials that can have sharp edges. Always call before you dig, even for something as small as a shade cover stake, because underground utility lines can sometimes run closer to the surface than you'd expect, especially near outdoor units where electrical lines are already present. Keep children and pets away from the unit while you're working, and make sure any structure you install is stable and secure so it can't tip over during high winds or storms. If your unit requires any electrical inspection or you notice frayed wiring, exposed connections, or unusual sounds coming from the unit itself, that's a job for a licensed HVAC technician, not a DIY project. As for ongoing maintenance, once your shade structure is installed, I'd recommend checking it every couple of months, especially after any major storms, just to make sure it's still secure and properly positioned. Clear away any leaves, dirt, or debris that accumulate underneath or around it. If you notice the structure shifting over time due to wind or ground settling, take a few minutes to re-level and re-secure it. This is one of those simple maintenance tasks that takes barely any time, but pays you back all summer long in the form of a system that isn't working overtime just to keep your house comfortable. So, let's bring this all together. Your outdoor air conditioning unit works by transferring heat from inside your home to the outside air, and that process depends heavily on the temperature of the air immediately surrounding the unit. When that unit sits in direct, unfiltered sunlight for hours at a time, the air around it becomes artificially hotter, forcing your system to work harder, run longer, and use more electricity than it should. By simply adding a properly positioned shade cover, one that blocks direct sun without restricting airflow, you can help your system operate closer to its intended efficiency. I tested this myself, in my own home, and noticed a real difference in how quickly my house cooled down and how often my system was cycling. It's a simple, inexpensive fix, usually costing less than $20 depending on what you choose, and it's one of those small changes that can make a noticeable difference over the course of a long, hot summer. Keeping your home comfortable doesn't have to be expensive or complicated. After 45 years of walking through homes just like yours, I've learned that the simplest fixes are usually the ones nobody thinks to try first. I hope this helps you keep your house cooler, your system running smoothly, and your energy bills a little more reasonable this summer. Thanks for spending a few minutes with me today, and I'll see you in the next one. If you found today's tips helpful, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribed. Every week, I share practical home maintenance advice I've learned over 45 years as a professional plumber, working alongside trusted tradesmen across every corner of this country, so you can avoid costly repairs, keep your home running efficiently, and hold on to a little more money in your pocket. I'll see you next time.